This is Asha Caravelli. She has been a friend and collaborator on a few things over the years and got a wonderful opportunity to get to know her in several different aspects of her life. But she is a death doula as well as a psychedelic practitioner and a lover of beautiful things in Mexico, as I am as well, and a grandmom, and many other things. So I welcome you. We're going to talk about what it is to be a death doula today. Did I miss anything?
I would just say that the official title, my official training is as a life, death, and transition doula, which is inclusive of my practice with Ibogaine in specific. I have worked with a number of different, facilitating a number of different psychedelics, but my primary role is Ibogaine provider, Ibogaine facilitator. And that falls into the transition part of the title. And then life doula is just giving a nod to the fact that I have the heart to help those in life. It needn't only be this portion that says you have to be in dying or in grief to receive the services that I offer.
Mm.
This would mean that I'm available for transitions through life, which can be job changes, moves, the passing of a loved one, like all kinds of different transitions that also are inclusive of grieving.
Fantastic. I think grief is such an interesting topic because it's involved in so many different aspects of our lives. We all experienced a great deal of grief in so many forms through the pandemic, and everyone was touched worldwide, whether there was death, whether there was loss of job, loss of freedoms, loss of
Life
perceptions.
as we know it.
Life as we knew it. Yeah, just understanding, like I know personally, I was a Californian, was born and raised in California, and I felt like I had to leave my home. The rules changed to be a Californian, and kind of permanently. It's still a little bonkers there, everyone. So, we have these massive perceptual transitions, and that truly leads to a whole host of things. So, but first off the bat, just so that because this is a new topic for me, for sure. What does it mean to be a death, life, and transitional doula? Like, what if you could just kind of give some definition of terms?
So, doula in the simplest form means helper. And the training that I received is through the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross Foundation, the chapter Mexico Centro. And the president of that foundation is Wilka Roy. And Wilka is, a very, very unique woman. She's a very powerful movement creator. And I was introduced to her through a therapist friend, and at a time when my own grief was acute in terms of the loss of a recent family member, and also that I had been a sitter. So, long story short, my ex-husband, his mother got healthy, beautiful woman, got pancreatic cancer, was diagnosed in June, made a decision in July to bypass any treatment, went directly into hospice and passed in December. So it was pretty quick. And had made sort of took to her room for a couple of weeks, just went into some kind of a cocoon. Something happened in that time and came out with her decision of what she wanted in her dying. And we, as her family, we didn't struggle with it. She knew what she wanted. We said, okay, we will do that for her. And so there were certain, like, pretty simple criteria. She wanted to die at home. She wanted us to be there. She didn't want to be in any pain. And we were able to do that for her. We sort of, two of the children were there in California. I'm also a California girl. And then Rocky and I, my ex-husband and I, we took turns, and we would just fly up there, be with her for a couple of weeks, come back and have that precious time with her, and also be able to help alleviate each other of the responsibilities of being bedside with a dying person, which is,
It's
you
a lot.
know, it's a lot. It's a lot of work.
It is a lot.
And then just the way that it turned out is I was there. It was my turn to be there. as she entered the last 6 days of her life and into the first few days of her afterlife. And not by any kind of pre-plan, but just by whatever holy design. My daughter was also there. And also my sister-in-law was there. And Susie, who that was Rocky's mother-in-law, two of her dear friends were there. And there was this vigil team that took her through. And I was able to, like, we had hospice as a support, and hospice gives you, at least the hospice of Marin gave us everything that we could need, medically speaking, everything we could need, from Chuck's pads to, mouth swabs to any medication that was needed so that she wouldn't be in pain. And then my crossover to my work with Ibogaine, which has most of the work with Ibogaine has been in opiate detoxification. So I just have this real on the job training in regards to opiates. I'm also a self learner. So I just talk to all of our opiate dependent clients about their experience, and I learned really all about it from the inside out, from the bottom up rather than from the top down. And so I had a practical knowledge of how to keep her out of pain, and that, we did that all the way through. And it was my first experience because I thought people died quickly. I thought it like, I was so sure when I arrived on Wednesday night that, because she passed on a Tuesday, following Tuesday morning, I was sure she was dying Wednesday night. And little did I know how many days were ahead, that you enter into this vigil, you enter into this time of no time, which, again, the crossover, the recognition. I've been in that space with Ibogaine for many years now, where the clock doesn't matter anymore, the outside activities don't matter anymore. There isn't anything else happening except the medicine, and we in attendance to the person who's with the medicine. But the medicine comes into the whole house. Like, it doesn't just come to the person, it comes to the container. And that's my experience when being with the dying as well. It doesn't, I mean, certainly they're the absolute center, but the coming of death fills the container, and everybody, I'm sure people have all kinds of ways that they respond to that disorientation.
Yeah. I shared prior that I've lost both my parents, and I remember after my mother passed, it was almost 15 years ago, 14 years ago now, that I remember coming out of it going, the world is still turning. There's no way. Yeah. There's no way. How is not every single person on the planet grieving? I was heartbroken in it because it was very fast. It was illness to death, 3 months. And it was, she wasn't the healthiest human being, but definitely we had a beautiful Christmas together. And then New Year's Eve, she had an aortic aneurysm. And then she was on the swing up, apparently. And then her heart failed, done. And it was about 3 months later. And it's shocking. At that time, I had not experienced recreational psychedelics, but the timelessness that people experience there, that's a very foreign concept. And I think whether you're using psychedelics or not, the idea of ceremony is also very foreign, and vigil and holding space, a container, these things for a busy American or really, Westerner. No, everything is to the time, to the moment. We got a Zoom meeting at 11 p.m. or 11 a.m. or whatever, and it's happening at that time and it ends at this time. And timelessness is not something people are terribly familiar with.
Yeah. And it's so pervasive. That time of no time is so pervasive within the container of people being born, people tripping, and people dying. It's like the feeling is so familiar to me. I had 2 children at home. I have attended births, but I wouldn't call myself a birth doula. And then certainly if doula is helper, then I am a psychedelic doula. Absolutely. Because I have logged thousands of hours of bedside time where I am also, the person who is having that experience. They have willingly surrendered their relationship with time, and so have I. I'm not also doing this and that while I'm attending to them. I also say, okay, I'll put my whole life aside for this period of time to hold this space and to be here. And so that's, it would be a reason that a doula would be called in, because exactly what you're saying, family it's a lot to ask of a family, particularly if they haven't had any end of life training, to just be able to recognize that they have, a lot's going to come really fast, and being baffled and being angry and having conflict are all kind of the fertilizers that are floating around in that space. And so if you have a doula there, and a doula, really, like the training that I received, it's all self-work. It's all self-examination, self-reflection. It's all self, so that when you find yourself, when you step into that container where somebody is dying, you don't begin to do your personal work then. You've been on it all the time in terms of noticing what arises in you when this happens, so that you're not so reactive to other people, because there'll be so much reactivity already present. And so being that stabilizing force that doesn't try to change that, doesn't try to shame or punish somebody for their confusion or bafflement or whatever it is that they bring, to be able to potentially find a member, a family member, if family is together when one of their members is dying, find a family member that can ally and help to give people a sense of what the ways that they can contribute, or if not contribute, perhaps not contribute to more conflict. Those are all things that can kind of smooth this process, which is like super respectful to the person who's going through it, who's actually going through it, because it's, whether they're conscious or unconscious, they're heavily uh, aware of and porous to what's going on around them, and they're trying to clean up their own stuff to go. So
I,
it's, and
yeah,
and that's often like rushed right away, because people are not, we don't really talk very much about getting ready to die or to practice dying. It's a lot of deal with it when I get there kind of thing.
yeah, or avoid it at all costs and try to pretend like it's never going to happen. I think one of the things that is fascinating to me is there's the few and far between that are interested in the dying process. Then there's the folks that you talk about ego death and things of that nature, that there's like active intentionality behind a pseudo death experience. But I know my mother died fairly young. She was 64. And so it was shocking to me. My father, I knew he was going to die. He was 70, almost 77. So it was his time, and we knew that. But I think even those that know that death is inevitable, grandma is 98, like it's still, what can we do? How do we, I think a clarification that I'd like to understand. I know in like the birth doula world, birth doula and midwifery, a midwife usually has some kind of medical background that they can make sort of recommendations medically. And there's obviously, whatever the birth plan is. Do you get together with your clients and make a death plan and spend time with the collective around that person? Like how
I
far?
have
Yeah.
I have two cases right now that I'm working on that are both long term. And so I've attended, I've been doing this for officially, like my training began pre-pandemic, 2019. And I'm in a community, I'm in San Miguel de Allende, Mexico. So I'm in a decent sized community. You know what I mean? Death is not, well, it's everywhere all the time. But so I've attended a number of deaths, and some of them have been quick. You're coming in at the very end. Some have been, as I was mentioning, these two cases, long term, like really a couple of years each. One woman had a terrible reaction to the vaccine, which affected her heart, which she ended up on a whole series of medications that she said had her in a death kneel. which was a huge contemplative phrase for me, a death kneel, just like you're just bowed down. Here it comes. There's no stopping it. And somehow she was able to come through it. And then another man who, honestly, it was his daughter who called in for services for him. And I can understand why, because he's such a storyteller. And I think that he needs to do this in order to settle the particularly early traumas of his life, abused by his father, who was a missionary. They lived in Africa. Like, just the stories go on. They've been going on for 2 years now, but it's all the time like the settling of these things for him. And his family, I think, was just, they couldn't handle it, because he's still, even 2 years into a life review, still jokes about all of it. Still every vulnerability that he has as a human being is made light of or diminished in some way. And there's his work. There's his work. So he's willing to enter into it, and he has, at different times gone into like the actual grieving of his life and how it's gone, and tears for the losses of the people who he's loved, his own parents, even though it was sort of mixed love-hate relationship, all of these things. And he talks about wanting to die. He talks about wanting to die all the time. And I think that there's this like a clutch point, an intersection when the body diminishes, but the mind is still there. And it has a really hard time reckoning, right? So sometimes that's how it happens, is the body goes before the mind, and other times the mind goes before the body. So there's so many different ways that sometimes it's an accident, sometimes it's a tragedy, sometimes it's an untimely death. There's lots of different ways that a person enters this, but yeah, unexpectedly long accompaniment. That's what we call it. The training is in compassionate accompaniment, which is based in arriving prepared to know nothing, to not believe anything, to not have any agenda or any services that you're trying to promote, to be in a state of active noble listening. And it's a lot of listening. And so that as you listen to people's stories, you begin to hear where their concerns are. And also they know exactly where the lack of tools are. They know that they're in an environment, particularly Westerners, they know that they're in an environment which doesn't allow for these types of conversations. These are the ones that nobody wants to have, that nobody wants to they want to change the subject ASAP. So one of the sweetest things about a long accompaniment is that boat kind of turns, and they come to soften to how difficult it is to talk about these things, because they finally have a platform to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I just want to call out, particularly in this day and age, people are all looking for different healing modalities and ways to finally heal ancestral trauma and heal themselves, and the process doesn't end. You're saying that even in death, we're still going. So just if we could just put that out there, that it's not something that there's an end goal. There's no goal in mind. A bit less suffering, perhaps, but something to recognize that, hey, don't worry, you're not going to get there. That's a little bit of a hopeful thought, at least. But also you mentioned that you're studying, or you studied with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. So for people who don't know who that is, that's the author and speaker who created the seven stages of grief. Is it five?
Five, but that's how do you say? There's always more to the story.
Right.
So that's been vastly oversimplified, but it gives people a doorway nonetheless.
Yes. So I'd love for your perspective, since you actually go through the process before, during, and after. I think people believe that grief comes once the person is passed. I think we both know that that's not true for the person dying, but also for the people around them. Like, I guess if there's words of wisdom that you can share with people as if they are facing this, everyone's going to die, let's putting that on the table, but facing some imminent death in their near future of a loved one, how does one prepare for grief? How does one start to identify what grief looks like? There's 5 stages, which we all know are fluid and don't go in a straight line, but like how, what does it come up as when you're starting that process with someone?
Well, I think, first of all, I'm pretty lucky because people approach me. They come to me looking for services through referral or, through a seeking of their own healing. So I'm not going out and finding people to make these offers to. In fact, I stay pretty quiet about this work. It's my nature to fly close to the ground. But I would there are death cafes. That's the first thing that comes up. There's a movement, worldwide movement of international death cafes. And the death cafe is a meeting, sometimes in person, most of the time, oftentimes online, particularly since the pandemic. And the death cafe was started by a gentleman in England, John Underwood. There's even a story previous to that, but I don't know it that well. But John Underwood was a man with a terminal diagnosis. He received a terminal diagnosis and happened to find himself in a coffee shop one day talking to a total stranger who was able to receive him, was able to receive that he was a human being with a terminal diagnosis. And he had an awareness that it's often much easier to speak with a stranger than it is to speak with your family members or people who you have close emotional ties to. And he created this sort of format where people come together and the idea was over cake and coffee, and they talk about death and they talk about loss and they talk about grief, and it's not a support group. The conversation is not, there's no tea party conversations. It's that a space is created where people can put their contemplations, their perspectives, their thoughts, their experiences out there, and other people will receive it and hold that with you. And then they can do the same and you hold it for them. And the idea is that this creates a safety, a container, and the open space for expanding perceptions around the idea of death. And also, you come to understand that your morbid thoughts come out of other people's mouths all the time.
Yeah,
All the time.
normalizing. Oh, wow. I had no idea. I had never heard of a death cafe, but I am definitely going to be researching that after this.
Yeah, yeah. Wilka has had, my mentor has had a death cafe for years, and it went from every week, long time, every week we would meet every week, to every other week, to once a month. I mean, we figured hundreds, it's been hundreds of death cafes, and people come, they sign in from all over the world. And so you have these eclectic, multicultural experiences being put into a container. And it brings about the contemplative heart. It brings about the compassion. It brings about the sense of connection. And it is, a place where one can go to be able to do this, to be able to have this conversation, where people are saying, yes, we want to talk about it. So that could be something somebody could do to get ready. I mean, it's different for different people, right? It's going to be much harder for some, a real chafing kind of experience. And for others, they're going to feel perhaps something in their heart. Like I have a curiosity about death. I have since I was a little girl, and no blame on anybody, but the questions that I had never got answered. Like I would ask the questions and then I would still have the questions after somebody gave me an answer. So
What was your initial like introduction to death? Like, was it
the loss
discussed?
of a pet, loss of a pet. My cat Omar, I remember my cat dying. And that's often, our early memories of loss are, dyings of pets. Beautiful. It's so beautiful to include our animal friends in our contemplations around death, and make space for how we might. I mean, I certainly am a pro human euthanasia. I believe that people should have the right to end it when they want to, without many stipulations. But I understand it's a controversial topic, but pets help us to think about how we might, approach the subject of euthanasia.
Yeah. How old were you when Omar passed?
I was 5.
You were
I was
5.
5. And then I didn't have very much death. I went through a really long period of time without anyone that I know dying, but people that I knew, they were having deaths. And so, my best friend would lose a grandmother, and it was just my circumstances. I didn't know my grandparents, so I didn't have those. The loss of them was always there, but I didn't really realize what it meant to have lost them because I never had them. And so that had its own particular set of grief. Like, it's always been a little strange to me that grieving has been reserved for dying. And I've been relieved that it's being allowed to also be included, that you can grieve, the movement from one house to another, the ending of a friendship, financial loss, so there's all of these kinds of things that where now it's okay. Yes, you can grieve these things as well. They're legitimate losses.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting because I think as we sort of move through, just within my lifetime at least, there's been a resolution and then re incarnation of ideas of what things like the attribution of why is it that we have this situation. So like for instance, and I'd love to get into this a little bit, addiction when I was born was a disease. That's, you were born with it, and I was told, don't drink, Kimberly, because we have a lot of addiction in our family and it's a disease and you're going to get it. And then part way through my life, people started to organically evolve that, and with a lot of effort, I think people were recognizing maybe this isn't just something you're born with. Maybe there's no circumstances that might maybe bring some of this on. And then now we're in a place of, I think, a little bit of confusion about what addiction is generally, and also what it looks like to be addicted to something, because we have these lovely things that people don't realize. If you can't live without it, if it's impeding your life, if you're not able to keep eye contact with another human being while you're in their presence, you need, there's something to understand about how the brain is working. I think grief has evolved very much. Used to be, you go to the wake, you cry, and then you go to dinner or drinks or something, and then okay, that person's dead now. You go to the burial. Maybe if you have particular traditions, you may have, if you have to be Jewish, you might have a more of a extended sort of grieving period where, a year later you go get the tombstone. But for the most part, it's a weekend. And then we're starting to realize we experience losses every day in some form. And it's wonderful practice for the bigger losses. And I think we're about there, but it's the skills that are still lacking. And in the container of America, at least, I love Mexico in the way that it treats death, because every year you are going to the graveyard and you are loving on your dead loved ones, you're celebrating their lives. And in a lot of traditions, there's a continual aliveness of that memory. And I think it's an evolution. We're in an evolution right now. I mean, how long has the idea of a death doula been around? Because it's just because it's brand new to me.
Oh, this is totally a reclamation. This is a very old practice, This is, I think people have been dying as long as there have been people, and something in us always wants to help. There are, whoever it is, like you have a dying clan member, somebody stays with them. And so I think we have always doulaed each other. And then we somehow gave it up to a death industry who kind of, you know, took care of the dirty stuff, took care of the body, the remains, that part of things, put it into a nice box and put it under the ground or burned it or whatever. And we just got far away from it. And so I think at least the doula lineage that I'm a part of is connecting to reclaiming what's already ours.
Yeah,
That we always took care of each other.
Yeah, it is something to be said. I think piggybacking on the idea that, the process of growing and healing and learning never ends. Many people pay a therapist for that, and it stays in that room, wherever or that Zoom call, with your therapist. But truly, we are humans, and humans are social creatures, and we see pain. Most people can see pain in other people and recognize that I know that pain. I've been there. Can I help you? Is there a way to help move through that? So community and particularly people who understand the dying process, really helpful. There was a time that I was several years back that I called you and said, I'm with my then partner's father. He's dying, but he's hallucinating a lot. And my partner at the time and I had both done psychedelics, and we were like, yeah, hallucinations, that's normal. Not to his brother, though. That was very challenging, and understanding, having somebody there or just somebody to call to say, is this normal? and or to have a feeling about it, to have an experience of it. Like, my loved one who's very straight and narrow, or someone else's loved one who's very straight and narrow, has lived a very normal kind of life, is suddenly talking about the angels coming up out of the floor. That.
And often up into the corner. Look, it's up and into the corner, into this space where there isn't anything to look at. And they're looking with eyes that see
Yes,
beyond what they're looking at anyways.
yes, he
Yeah.
wasn't even in the room for the most part. He was busy, and he was literally settling accounts. He was
Yeah.
he was making change for people, in that was his way of settling accounts.
Right,
um
that's beautiful.
it's so interesting, and I feel like, unless you've been there, you don't know what to expect. So it's a beautiful gift that you offer, that you can be there with people and kind of show them the ropes.
Well, yeah, I mean, less and less in that space, less and less do I make offerings of help, but I just hold more space. I let them talk and I listen, as opposed to, like I said, it's really a big practice to not come in with any kind of fix, or, you know, reflect back is what the training is to receive it and reflect it back, because it's theirs. It's
Mhm.
their experience.
Yeah. Do you feel like, I mean, obviously you have people coming to you, so they're wanting to work through this process. And just from what I've shared, I have an investigation that I'm trying to understand and unravel a little bit with the new diagnosis of prolonged grief syndrome, which means as soon as it's in the DSM, it's going to have, if it doesn't already have, a long laundry list of drugs that will be prescribed. That's the nature of the DSM. So the idea that there could be a prolonged grief syndrome, and if you read the DSM description, it says can and does lead to addictive behaviors and addictive patterns. And it's clearly understood, because you have experience with what many people believe is an addiction medicine, Ibogaine. It's not just that. We know it's not just that for those who have experienced Iboga or Ibogaine. But what are your thoughts on where the root of addiction lies? And do you see any correlation with grief or loss? Or
I think, I mean, this is such a huge topic to begin with, but so we'll do our best to scratch the surface.
yeah,
I think that we have to acknowledge degrees, like the spectrum of addiction,
yeah,
because you can have a soft addiction, or what is deemed a soft addiction, sugar or gambling, or, spending, or, something like that. And then you can have really hardcore addictions like strong opiates, mixes of drugs, opiates and stimulants. I think it wouldn't be fair to have the conversation without being inclusive of the fact that people should have the right to soothe themselves, to comfort themselves. And so I believe that all of this comes from a desire to alleviate something uncomfortable. Now, the roots of that, I don't know how important it is to get to the roots of it. I think sometimes it is. And sometimes I think that that's the flavor of the day, because I've been alive long. That's the therapeutic flavor of the day, is to get to the root of things, because I've been alive long enough to see a number of therapeutic waves come through that have the answer to the human condition. To be, you know what I mean? Used
oh
to
yeah,
be past life regressions. If you could regress into your past life and solve that, then come forward into this life, you'd have no more problems. So the whole thing is weird to me, that the promise of no more problems, because I don't know anything about that. That
Right.
doesn't make any sense at all. But I do think that there are vulnerabilities in being human. And it's even bizarre for me to be saying it, but there are forces that are outside of this dimension. I think that at a certain point, conditions can become such that you actually, inside of the body, inside of the vessel, I think you kind of go into some sort of animation, suspended animation, or living death. Certainly you see people bent over like, zombies using isotonitazine, and they're just bent in half. They're in their body, but they're dead at the same time. And that's, you know, I see it as something has come in that has taken up residence in a person's, like, in their willpower, in their embodiment, and something else has taken over the driver's seat. And it's usually pretty vacuous, it's usually pretty unsatisfiable, comes with a lot of craving, seems to feed on its own tail and just go around and around and around and devouring its host a little bit at a time. And when that host dies, which happens often in a like fentanyl overdose, for instance, I think that entity, that spirit, that demon, I mean, we use all these words when we talk about addiction, it finds somebody else who has that vulnerability, somebody else that where it can take up residence. And so part of the work with Iboga, because Iboga is such a strong spirit in and of itself, and it comes through, and it, in its own big bullyish kind of way, kicks everything else out. And that's what I have seen many times with addicts, is that Iboga literally pushes out the addicted spirit. And you have this, like, kind of shell shocked, brand new, humbled, just coming back into themselves kind of person. I don't know much about what's going on in the greater Ibogaine world, where you come through Ibogaine like a shiny new Porsche, but that's weird to me, because I
I
don't
don't know who
think,
comes out looking like a shiny new Porsche. Ugh.
well, social media would have it as
Oh,
such,
yes, of
that
course.
now you've taken this medicine and you're healed, and it showed you this and it showed you that. And never once do we really talk about how all done, right? We don't really talk about what it means to come back from the dead, which is, a certain point of addiction, you're living dead, walking dead. And that's part of, another thing that's drawn me to the end of life work, is that I work with people who, how are they alive to begin with? They don't show up at Ibogaine after their first binge. It's usually like, it's this, or I don't care if I die anymore. Right. So they've already realized that that they're not living their own life,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. I guess because this is just an investigation on my part, because I'm in grief. I feel like I've resolved and relieved myself of the grief of my mother passing, but my father just passed last year. So I'm considering the idea that, there isn't a timeline, definitely not a timeline that we can all ascribe to, but, there's different circumstances. I think I'll just put it out on the table that is not, going to be agreed with, but I don't think there's such thing as prolonged grief syndrome, because I think we can get stuck and not have tools to move through grief. But why demonize a beautiful learning process? I see addiction as a beautiful learning process as well, because I've been through it. And so it's something that I can look at and go, I see what you're trying to do there. I get it, and when you're in, swinging back into the dying process, there has to be a letting go. And like, just quite literally, whether you're in the addictive process, whether you're in the dying process, whether you're in the grieving process, there's no way to keep going with your fists clenched, and that, I think, knowing that that's okay. I think that's one of the things that Western science also makes very difficult for people to let people just die, because they will do everything to keep that body breathing, whether it be on a respirator and the, artificial heart, it'll keep going. But at what point do we get to let go? Like how when you're working with someone, whether it be with the addiction or the dying process, how do you support them to find that their way in the letting go process?
It's much easier if they're outside of a medical environment, right? So much easier process if somebody's passing at home because there isn't the pressure to keep them alive. And that often falls on, how the family members are processing the experience. So you hear about it, right? Some want to keep them alive and some want to let them go. Uh, you know, it is the reality that unless you do the paperwork in advance of dying, you're sort of subject to the process as it goes. If you do an advance directive that says no heroic measures and, you take those steps, then you have that on your side. I mean, it's still going to go down the way it goes down, but having a death plan, just like one would have a birth plan, at least gives anyone who's advocating for you, here it is, this is what they want. And so more and more people want that. And also, it's true. The medical system is designed to keep you alive, and people are kept alive beyond that, they're given food and fluids beyond the time that the body wants them. Because it's really hard for a family member. It's really hard when the person stops eating, they won't take in anything else, and it's coming, and you're just trying to, there are conflicted feelings in there.
Yeah.
Am I doing the right thing? Am I killing them? People have a hard time giving a dying person in pain. They have a hard time giving them morphine, for instance, because they don't want them to die addicted, but it's like they're already dying. The dying is happening now. But people have their feelings about that. They have to come up against their prejudices and their preconceived ideas and their fears of being judged by others and the pressure to conform to the system. All of those things, that's all stuff that we as doulas are working on in ourselves so that when we get there, we're not working on that.
Yeah. Wow. Oh man, what an interesting, I mean, I can see the pathway of why you got here, but I understand you had an experience that made it seem so tangible, and like this is what my next step is because of the experience of your was it mother-in-law or father-in-law?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she was very much my mother. There were ways in which my mother-in-law was the mother that my mother couldn't be for me.
Beautiful. I mean, we have family in so many different ways and spaces, blood or not. The path to being a death doula, did you feel like it was a calling or just like oh, this is so what I'm doing, just like a natural next step?
No, I don't know about that. Looking back, I can see how I took this step and then that step and then that step, and there was a path because of the formalized training with the EKR. It sort of feels like there's a time more and more and more people are talking about dying, more and more and more people are bringing consciousness to death, more and more people are reclaiming this process within their families for themselves or family members. And with that being the case, the need for more helpers obviously comes. And then I am just naturally a helper. Like that is just what I've done. I don't come into situations to make them worse. I come in to make them better. As I get older, I understand also what it means to come in and do nothing when there's nothing that can be made better and have that be okay. And even if there's just one person in the room who says it's okay that this is not going to get better, it's all right that this is happening, it eases the tension for the people who are surrounding the dying person, and it eases the tension for the dying person.
Yeah. Do you tend to I mean, obviously the person who's dying is the focal point, but once they've moved on, are you working with the families afterward to go through a process?
It depends on the families, depends on where I am. I mean, this is all at this point in my life, this is all pro bono work. So I don't make any money. It's designed that way. I don't charge any fees for this work. Yeah, this is service to my community, the way that it is set up now. And that's a Mexico thing, and that's a an Elizabeth Kubler-Ross thing. That's a Wilka Roig, my mentor and the president of that foundation. That's her thing. You had said it earlier, this is evolving the death culture. That is her mission. And so in this portion of this movement, that's what I see this as for me. God, I lost what the question was, Kim.
Oh, no, no, no. It was just was this a calling? Or did it just seem like a next step? But I didn't realize that this was a fully pro bono circumstance for you. That's
Yeah.
wow, your heart just got much, much bigger and like it's fixing you at this point. Because I
Well,
know,
and there's also a certain level of freedom so that I don't feel obligated. I don't have any financial obligations tied to this work. Like I need to see so many clients a month because I've got to pay my rent or, whatever it is. I have that with other work. And also I understand this is like the certification is as a non-medical professional. So in its full certification, having completed all the courses and put in all the hours and done all of that, what we receive is a badge that says I can enter a medical environment and be a part of a comprehensive medical team, a doula who joins the doctors and joins the medical team if that's what's necessary. Like I said, most people are, at least the cases that I have been involved in, have been at home. But that's the official title. So it has like the education of a professional, but we don't get involved with the medications. We don't get involved with those kinds of things. I just happen to have a knowledge and experience with all different kinds of medications because of Ibogaine, which is so sensitive to, you have to be very, very attentive to all medicine interactions and contraindications. So I understand what needs to be done in terms of, certainly if somebody's being over medicated in their dying, um, it's hard to not have an opinion about that, but if I do, I try to keep that to myself because that happens that people are who want to be conscious are over medicated, or people who want to be unconscious are not medicated enough.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's obviously since you're coming in as a support to the family and it's for those that everyone has been touched by death if they're over 5, 10, you will be touched by death in some shape or form of a close person, I think, but understanding how to navigate that process and understanding what you're up against as well and what resources your loved one has. That's also something that I think I knew only because of my old partner's father, and I realized, and we happened to rent an Airbnb with a woman who was a nurse at that hospital and said, they're not giving you hospice. You need an external person to come in and say, we want hospice, and grab that person and go get hospice for yourself because they're not going to give it to you.
Yeah.
There's a navigation of that. Do you feel like you get involved in any of that stuff, or you're just support?
It really just hasn't happened in my experience.
Do you see mostly people in Mexico, or do you come up to the States at all, or?
Just mostly in Mexico. Yeah, I've been at 2 deaths in the US, but my time is primarily in Mexico right now. I'm just on a long San Miguel run.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're
And I've just made a decision because I do have a life to support. Pro bono work I will do when I can, and also say no because I know that there are other helpers. I know that there are, other people will show up, and that's a really important thing to understand because there can be a pressure to like do it all, it's like all on your shoulders when you get there. Everybody looks at you because they understand you to have experience in that container. But really it's a lot to take on everybody's stuff. We try to practice what's called the ring theory of support, which is the dying person, and then concentrically, like, their spouse or siblings, cousins, co-workers, like concentric circles moving out, and having people understand that the direction of support is inward and the direction of dump is outward. So you don't dump in on the person who's closest to the person who's dying, the people close to them. Don't dump your problems in on that dying person. Don't dump your problems in on the people who are directly taking care of that dying person. Have some level of support that you could take what comes up in you outward.
You answered the question before I even asked it, because I was going to say, obviously, it's a lot on you. And if you had any other words of wisdom, which you just answered, but like just tools for people when they're going through that process, and just things that keep you rejuvenated and available. Like, do you have any for things that self-care rituals, which I have to say that, the idea of self-care is not a bubble bath. It's very much a sort of excavation of self to be able to make space. Do you have any thoughts for those that maybe approaching the dying process with a loved one, where they can sort of prep themselves a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I have a daily practice. I have a dedicated, strong daily practice. I track my practice. I have a consistency in my practice. My practice is led by partially self-led and partially led by a teacher. So I do that and have been committed for several, God, I did more years than I can count now, but I do mark it on my calendar every time I practice. And so I've got a record to myself that says, you've got a lot of practice at this. I have come through clients' passings, and I've just been sick. I've had cold sores, I've had diarrhea, I've had to take to my own bed as well. It's a really, I can't explain what comes into that container. I can't explain it except to say that when it's happening, there's the way I see it is like I have my imaginings about what it's going to be when somebody dies or is born or is going through an Ibogaine treatment. I can create all kinds of a story before anything has happened. But when you're actually there and you're in it, it moves for me out of the imaginal field and into the knowing field, which is in my body. Like you know when somebody has died. You just know it. It's in the room. I don't know about for everybody, but for me, it's like I'm no longer imagining what it might be when they're dead. They're dead now. And now my body knows it. And that's transformed me. It can take me months to years before I ever shed a tear for somebody I loved who has died, or somebody who I've been present for when they've died. So tears are not my grief symptom. It's usually this disbelief and kind of confusion about what the fuck. And like you said, the world is still going on. People are still grocery shopping and pumping gas and walking on sidewalk. Like, what is going on with this crazy world? So knowing that, you say, like, I don't even try to admonish myself for feeling that way. I've come to recognize that's just the way I feel. I often require a good amount of rest and just like a lack of stimulation, a lot of alone time after, a run of Ibogaine treatments, or accompaniment through dying, or profound, deeply subjective experiences. And they leave me often just a little wrecked.
Yeah. Yeah, for person giving birth, and those
gets pretty real. And
yeah.
so, feeling like I'm equipped to step into the container as neutral as I can be, so that I can stay as aligned with what's actually happening and not be so involved with my imaginations, or the stream of emotions that come up, because you can't cut the emotions off. You have to let them keep moving, nor can you be appropriately in a room and you're the one, as the doula, you're crying and flipping out and everybody's trying to comfort you. Like, that's not appropriate either.
Yeah, that's not gonna work. Yeah, yeah. Do you feel like, I mean, you're kind of Jedi level at this point, so because you have a daily practice for eons. I mean, you've been serving medicine for 15, 20 years at this point. You've been working.
Yeah, 15 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The folks going through the death process, folks who have going through the grieving process for a number of years in various forms. Not that death is going to be new to anybody listening to this, but because usually people realize they need to look at this after a death, what would you say if you could impart just like the toddler level of how to help yourself prepare for death?
Honestly, what has helped me the absolute most, what has really gotten me ready, is talking to mothers who have lost their children. Sometimes mothers whose children have committed suicide, or they've lost their child to addiction or some kind of illness. But those, how do you say, just listening. So there's much less doing, much less doing than you think in terms of getting prepared.
Yeah.
Because it would be so nice if we could do ourselves into a prepared state. Just keep doing and doing and doing and doing, and then we're there, and still we're blindsided.
You got a little purview into how my world operates. How do we prepare? How can I do this better? But yes.
Things like radical self-love, self-compassion, patience with yourself, and understanding that it's natural to want to be prepared. It's also natural to have taken all the steps and still find yourself ill prepared, still be bowled over by it. A kindness to yourself as you go through an experience like that. I think that that's important, that there's also some, in some way, shape, or form, you've cultivated some relationship with yourself in terms of being kind.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Asha. I feel like it's such a gift to be able to share what you've been practicing, and even more so the fact that you practice it pro bono is astonishing to me. But to share the wisdom that you've cultivated feels like there's the silly saying of the two things you can't avoid: death and taxes. I know plenty of people who've evaded taxes. You're not getting out of death. You're not getting out of it. My secondary interest at the moment is longevity, because I know that the body can, at least you can experience the body feeling better in this life than not. But I think it's an interesting dichotomy of like, how do we push off death? How do we escape death? How do we, not have the biomarkers of death or dying or aging? You're not getting away from it. It's just how we're built, and that's what makes it beautiful, because it gets to be precious, and I so greatly appreciate you sharing your wisdom. And is there anything else you want to add before we kind of wrap up a little bit?
I think we could talk a little bit about death denial.
Yes, you also said remind me about the ride along. I forgot about.
Okay, thank you so much. We'll start with that one because it's pretty lighthearted.
Okay.
So I'm not saying that anybody needs to do what I do. This is just what I do.
I know.
I have conversations, regular ongoing conversations with people on the other side. Like I just talk to them like you and I are talking right now. And whenever possible, some physical object that belonged to them. I have a tendency towards small things. I don't want their big paintings or pianos or stuff. I want some itty bitty little thing that I can put somewhere on my body, in my sock, in my bra, in my pocket, and take them with me for the day. And it's, the one who rides along with me the most is my mother-in-law, who had this thing with pennies. She collected pennies her whole life. And so I have some of the pennies that she collected, and in my, I have a picture of her, and I say good morning to her, and not every day, but, as often as I think about it. And then I'll, say something dorky like, hey, want to ride along with me today? And I'll stick a penny in my pocket and just keep her in my consciousness, keep her as a part of this life, which she's not getting to be a part of, which is my daughter has now had a child. She would be a great grandmother. It's like, oh, we're going to see the baby today. You want to ride along with me? And I'll just stick a penny in my pocket. And it's a way to, how do you say? It's not like there's not pain involved in that, because I know that will never happen. I know that she isn't here, that she never will meet this baby. And I grieve that, the thing that didn't get to occur. But it also feels like, we have a language between us. I have a place where I offer coins every day as part of my practice. I offer a coin in a certain place where I walk. You want to hear that? So there's a peace pole in San Miguel. The Dalai Lama has peace poles all around the world, and it's like a tall obelisk that says, "May peace prevail on earth," in all different languages, Spanish, indigenous Mexican, English, sign language. It's really pretty. So the letters of all the different languages are etched into the stone, and I stick a coin in there every time I walk in the park. And I walk in the park like most mornings every week. So I give coins, and then coins come back to me. And I used to do it where I would put a coin in the first letter. If there's a K on there, and I was thinking about you, I'd put a coin in the K and just say a blessing of peace for you, for Kim. But I've settled on E for everyone. That's just, it makes it easy.
You have a long list of these days.
Yeah, and a strong desire for there to be peace in a time when, we all could use a little more peace internally, externally, globally, all of that stuff. So it's a language that I use to speak to the other side. And I'm continuously surprised at how many coins cross my paths in significant moments, where again, it doesn't matter if anyone else believes it. I believe that it's the other side speaking back to me.
I love that. That's a wonderful practice for regardless of, just anybody can do, and anybody can, bring their loved one with them.
Yeah, my dog's, the collar. Yeah, she has a little tag on her collar. Just stick it in my pocket, stick it in my bra. It's like, oh, even though Petunia she's not here anymore, she could still ride along.
I love it. I love
Yeah.
that. Awesome. And you were gonna mention the denial of death as well.
Oh, just that, giving an acknowledgement to and giving voice to death denial is a real thing. Um, uh, the it's a big block in people being able to just expand their perspective about what death is, because it can be pretty small and there's not a lot of places for it to grow because people avoid talking about it, forgetting that, getting too serious about this life that we're living, remembering or not remembering that there will be an end to this story. And this moment that we're in right now, while it may feel like it's everything, that moment there will also have a whole experience along. Death denial, it's our training was to contemplate a lot of self questions for self, and then just contemplate it. You're not trying to solve it. You're just trying, just think about it for a while. And so we had a module on death denial that was significant for me because it coincided with a time when I was beginning to see some real damage from 40 years of cigarette smoking. And when this, in big bold letters, how do you deny death? When that question came to me, like on its heels immediately was, well, shoot, I smoke. That's how I deny that I'm going to die. And I was beginning, like I said, to see some physical signs and feel some physical signs that this would be, if I keep smoking, just keep it up, Asha. Just keep it up. Just keep puffing away. How do I think I'm going to go in this life? And that being real with myself about that really inspired me. And I quit smoking. Quit smoking after 40 years. Can't begin to tell you. Like, I know it doesn't mean I won't die, but I won't die of a smoking related illness. Maybe I will, who knows? But I know that I've also taken steps to, um, choose a different kind of death than that one.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. I grew up with smokers, and I smoked briefly as a teenager. But one of my dance teachers, we were in class, and I studied it in college, and we were going for a Thanksgiving break, and she said, "Okay, everybody touch right here behind your collarbone there, because that's the top of your lung. Take a deep breath, feel that space there. That's also the meridian, start of the meridian point in the eastern." And said, "Remember that this is the place of compassion and grief, because you're going to go be with your family." And I always found it very interesting that smoking invades the lungs, which is the organ of grief. And it's fascinating because it is a denial. And I know that I had, after last time I smoked was like 24, I'm 43. I started vaping for a month. I vaped for a month after my dad died. And I was like, do this? I had never vaped in my life at that point. And I was like, whoa, Okay. All right. Interesting. But like,
Straight to the lungs.
yeah, yeah, like they were asking for something. We're like, will you please take some deeper breaths here? Probably is what it was asking. But it's a slippery slope. It's interesting. But luckily that's long past. But congratulations, because I know that that's very hard for many people to let go of.
Thank you. I would also just mention, because it was so notable to me, having been a lifelong drug user, I practice a lot of harm reduction in my substance use, but nicotine. So I've come on and off of a number of drugs through my lifetime. But nicotine, I cried every single day. It took me a year to quit smoking. Quit smoking was quick. I used patches to discontinue nicotine addiction. But every single time I took my nicotine patch off, I would just cry and cry and cry. Like, that process of removing that from my body, it really opened up grief doors like crazy.
Hmm. Yeah, I was born addicted to nicotine. My mother smoked while I was in the womb, and I often in some of my medicine journeys, I've gone into those spaces of remembering while in the womb, feeling through the umbilical cord, because I've had lifelong stomach issues, and feeling that hit of nicotine. It's not my friend, even though it was around me all the time. So it's something that it has not been useful in my world. But I do know many people. And it's been described as their friend, because it's the thing you go be by yourself with, or you can hang and just stand with other people smoking. And it's for lack of a better word, it can be ceremonial within your day. I mean, that's what addiction often is the cry for, is ceremony. So, it's such an interesting thing, but I'm glad, because we need you on this earth for a very long time.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a really good decision. I'm
Yeah,
very happy.
good, good. I'm sorry that continues to, or it was such a difficult process, but letting go isn't easy, which is
Well, and I wish that it were allowed to be easier to just feel your feelings, because the reality is, when you cry, it really isn't as awful as, oh my God, like we got to make that stop. And, just feeling your feelings, feeling what you feel is not, it's worse in the beginning as you're getting used to it. And then the more you do it, the more you realize they come and they go like a breath. It comes in, it comes out. And it seems as if not feeling feelings creates much more problem than actually feeling them,
right.
allowing yourself to have it. Yeah, it's uncomfortable, your nose gets plugged, and all the things that happen physically that make it uncomfortable. But
But yeah, I mean, yeah, I cried this morning and I was like, wait, nope, don't cry too much, because you're going to be puffy. You're going to be on camera. Like, normally I'm like, whatever, we're crying today, or several times. But, I hadn't cried up until the past month or so. And my father died over a year ago. So it's like, oh, yeah, it's not the first thing. It's not the first thing for a lot of people. It can be anger, it can be planning. For some people, it can be, it manifests in so many different ways. And it is normal. I think one of the
yeah,
most beautiful things I listened to lately, and I forget her name, I want to say it's Sarah. I'll link in the comments what I'm referring to, but there was a woman who's been doing some grief research. And she said, I think the missing piece is, this is a learning, to recognize it's a learning. And all emotions really are messengers to tell you what's going on and your reaction to the universe that you're in. But this is truly a learning process. The letting go and the dying and the release, the loss, it's a learning process, because it's a maturation. This might be a
it's an initiation for sure.
yeah, yeah, a topic for another day, but a large portion of what I would like to dive into with maybe you another time, and others, the lack of initiation that we have, rites of initiation we have in this life, in the Western culture. And if we had those more frequently, I think we'd be able to prepare for those big initiations like death, the big initiations like birth, transition. We don't have a lot of practice. So I'm so grateful to have broader conversations about making this normal. Like, I didn't know a death cafe was a thing. I'm on it. I'm going to research that. These are conversations that should be had. So,
Yeah, I'll send you a link too for, a death cafe, the one that I've been attending. It's monthly, and there's a link for a Zoom in there, and you can get on her mailing list. But there are death cafes all over the world. It's pretty startling.
I love it. I mean, that's beautiful. We're not getting away from it. So let's
Yeah.
talk about it, you know?
Yeah. A lot of people want to.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Anything else that you would like to share?
At this point, nothing comes to mind, but anything that we talk about is another 10 minutes of talking. And my hope is that we will come together again and that this conversation will continue. I don't know who is going to be watching this or what the audience is going to be, but if anyone wanted to contact me, you're welcome to give them my contact.
I'll link it in the description so folks can.
Beautiful.
And thank you.
I think maybe I would add just one more thing, which I found to be really good advice in terms of preparing for death. It's something that Wilka has always advocated for us, encouraged us to do, is to practice dying. Practice dying regularly, like go somewhere and die every day, whatever it is, some kind of fantasy of dying in a car accident or jumping off a building or whatever it is, but let yourself play out what it means. Let yourself wonder about the series of events that would go down after your spirit left your body. Let yourself, death meditations, there are a lot of profoundly moving and inspirational death meditations where somebody takes you through what it means for your body to go under the ground and decay and those kinds of things that might happen. There's also another movie, really amazing film director, Scott Kirshenbaum, and he has a movie called The Last Ecstatic Days, which is kind of making its way around the US and the world at this point. And that's about a man named Ethan who had brain cancer and needed a place to die. And so these doulas came together and created a place for him to die and documented. The whole thing is documented, and it really, 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 really lets you into the dying process. He was an amazing man.
Wow.
Last Ecstatic Days, and Scott's an amazing filmmaker.
My gosh. Wow. Wow. I will definitely check that out. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I think it's not something we can anticipate. You can anticipate it, you can expect it, but you really don't have a concept. You really don't have a concept. And like every death is different, And so it's every human's different. We all have our own way that we've been in this world. So of course our death is going to be unique to us. So
Yeah.
wow, what a beautiful last contribution to share.
Yeah, very special man.
Yeah, my goodness. Thank you, Asha. Yes, this will continue. And probably when I come visit you in Mexico.
Look forward to it. Mi casa es tu casa.
Thank you. Thank you. And I
Thank
will
you, Kim.
I will share some ways to get in contact with you and link to your website and things like that. But many blessings, many blessings. Thank you so much, Asha.
Thank you, Kim. I've really enjoyed this time with you today.
Me too. Me too. Thanks.